Paris, 1938. The city of lights. But some streets never see the sun. On Rue Saint-Lazare, a woman captures photographs that whisper of the dead, faces half seen in the silver, figures standing where no one stood. And when Detective Lucien Moreau is called to investigate, he finds something colder than murder waiting in the darkroom. Every shadow has a source. But what if this one doesn't? Let's step into the alley and see what the light forgot.
The city of Paris in 1938 was a symphony of sounds and shadows, a place where every corner held a secret and every face told a story. Detective Lucien Moreau stepped out of the Rue Saint-Lazare train station, his polished shoes clicking softly against the uneven cobblestones. The air was thick with the scent of coal smoke and freshly baked bread, mingling with the distant whistle of an arriving locomotive. His grey eyes, sharp and contemplative, scanned the bustling street as the late afternoon sun cast long, distorted shadows that stretched and recoiled like living things. Lucien adjusted his trench coat collar against the chill that seemed less a matter of weather and more of atmosphere, a subtle tension that had settled over the city these past weeks. He was no stranger to the undercurrents of Parisian life, having once served as a police detective before tragedy pushed him into quieter, more solitary pursuits. Yet something about the summons that morning hinted this would not be an ordinary case. Following the directions scribbled on a worn piece of paper, Lucien found himself before a modest building tucked between a faded cafe and a bookshop. The sign above the door read Atelier Dumas Photography in elegant, curling script. The studio was small, windows streaked with the grime of countless seasons, the faint smell of chemicals drifting out as the door creaked open. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of developing fluid and aged paper. Shelves lined with glass plates and carefully stacked prints reached toward a ceiling darkened by time. The room was dim, lit only by the waning light filtering through dust-laced windows. Lucien's gaze was immediately drawn to a photograph pinned on the far wall, a black and white image of a young woman standing beside a man, both frozen in the grainy stillness of the frame. But there was something profoundly wrong about the picture. He stepped closer, noting the subtle distortions in light and shadow. There, just behind the couple, was the faint silhouette of a figure, a man, whose presence was neither acknowledged by the subjects nor by any record of the shoot. The figure's eyes seemed to pierce the gloom, staring out with an intensity that set Lucien's skin prickling. The hairs on the back of his neck rose as he realized this was no ordinary photograph. From the doorway came a soft noise, and Lucien turned to see a young woman enter hesitantly. Her dark hair was pinned back, revealing sharp features that were at once striking and guarded. She wore a modest, elegant dress, her fingers nervously twisting a strand of hair as if to anchor herself to the present. "Detective Moreau," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the tremor beneath. "I am Lise Dumas. I own this studio." Lucien held up a hand gently. "I've seen the photograph, Mademoiselle Dumas. It's unlike anything I've encountered before." She swallowed hard, glancing toward the haunting image. "I took that picture myself. I don't understand how that man got there. No one was with us that day." The detective's mind raced. Light, reflection, the interplay between what is seen and unseen, these would be the keys to unraveling the mystery. But already he sensed layers of deception woven into the fabric of this case. "Tell me everything, Lise," he said. "Every detail, no matter how small." As she began to speak, the shadows in the room seemed to deepen, wrapping around them both like a silent witness. Outside, the hum of the city pulsed on, oblivious to the chilling enigma unfolding within these walls. Lucien lit a cigarette, the faint glow illuminating his thoughtful expression. The smoke curled upward, mingling with the dust motes dancing in the fading light. He studied the photograph again, the ghostly figure etched into the frame like a silent scream. This was no ordinary case. Here, in the shadowed corners of Paris, Light and reflection were not mere elements of art, they were weapons in a game of deception that could cost lives. The detective's pulse quickened. Somewhere in this labyrinth of images and shadows lay the truth, waiting to be uncovered. And Lucien Moreau was determined to find it, even if it meant confronting the ghosts of his own past. As the evening deepened, the city's dance of light and shadow continued, and the first threads of a dark mystery began to weave themselves into the fabric of Rue Saint-Lazare. Lucien felt a chill, not from the autumn air, but from the unsettling realization that the shadows he chased were alive, and they were watching him back. Outside, the street lamps flickered to life, casting pools of amber glow onto wet pavements. The photograph remained pinned on the wall, a silent sentinel holding secrets that refused to stay buried. Lucien took a final drag of his cigarette, the embers glowing bright against the encroaching darkness, and prepared to step deeper into a world where nothing was as it seemed. But as he glanced once more at the ghostly figure trapped forever in the frame, a question echoed in his mind. How could a victim appear in a photograph without ever having posed for it? And what shadows did that answer hide? The game had begun. The morning light seeped reluctantly through the grimy windows of Les Dumas photography studio, a modest space tucked away near the bustling Rue Saint-Lazare. Detective Lucien Moreau stepped inside, his keen grey eyes immediately drawn to the photograph pinned with care to the cracked plaster wall. It was a portrait unlike any he had ever seen, a chilling image that seemed to breathe with a life of its own. Capturing a figure who had never sat for the camera, Lucien's gaze lingered on the photograph, scrutinizing every detail. The lighting was peculiar. Shadows fell in unnatural patterns, and yet the image held a disturbing clarity. The victim's face was pale, almost translucent, their eyes fixed somewhere beyond the frame, as if trapped in a liminal space between reality and illusion. The detective's fingers itched to touch the surface, to draw out the secrets hidden beneath the glossy finish. Les stood quietly nearby, her dark hair pinned back tightly, her sharp features drawn with tension. She watched Lucien with a mixture of apprehension and silent hope, the weight of the strange photograph pressing heavily upon her. "I never took this picture," she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. "It appeared among the prints one morning. I swear no one posed for it." Lucien nodded slowly, sensing the truth behind her words. "Then someone is using your studio as a stage for their own purposes," he said. "Tell me everything you know about this photo. When was it found? Who else has seen it?" Les hesitated, glancing toward the darkroom door where the faint drip of developing chemicals echoed softly. "I discovered it 2 days ago, after closing. At first, I thought it was a prank or a mistake, but then other photographs started to show similar images. People who shouldn't be there, faces that don't belong." The detective's mind raced. The implications were chilling. If victims were appearing in images they never posed for, then the killer was manipulating not just flesh and blood, but the very fabric of perception. "Show me everything," Lucien said, moving toward a cluttered table scattered with prints and negatives. Together, they examined the photographs under varying lights, Les carefully adjusting the angles and intensity to recreate the eerie effects. The subtle play of shadows and reflections suggested a mastery of photographic technique that transcended ordinary skill. Lucien noticed how the light bent and fractured, how reflections in glass and mirrors were exploited to craft illusions that blurred the line between reality and deception. "Who else comes here?" Lucien inquired, his eyes never leaving the prints. "A mix of locals and travelers passing through the station," Les replied. "I'm careful about who I let in, but lately there's been a restlessness, a quiet fear that I can't explain." Lucien's cigarette flickered to life in the dim studio, the smoke curling like ghostly tendrils as he pondered the implications. The killer was not only playing with images, but with the fears and memories of a community already shadowed by uncertainty. The detective's instincts told him that this was only the beginning. "We must tread carefully," Lucien said, his voice low but resolute. "This case will test everything we think we know about truth and illusion." Lise nodded, her eyes reflecting a fragile trust. "I want to help," she said quietly. "For my sibling, for all of them." Outside, the sounds of Paris stirred to life, the clatter of train wheels, distant voices, the murmur of a city that had no idea how close darkness lurked within its heart. Inside the studio, the photograph remained pinned to the wall, a silent witness to a mystery that defied explanation. Lucien knew one thing with certainty: the game had begun, and the shadows on Rue Saint-Lazare were only growing deeper. As the afternoon waned into evening, the detective and the photographer continued their painstaking work, searching for clues in patterns of light and shadow. Each moment brought new questions, each answer revealed more layers of deception. The studio, once a place of art and memory, was now a battleground where truth fought to emerge from the fog of illusion. And somewhere in the depths of the city, the killer watched, waiting to see if their secrets would remain hidden or be brought to light. Lucien extinguished his cigarette, the faint scent of tobacco mingling with the chemical tang in the air. He glanced once more at the photograph, the image that refused to fade from his mind. The first frame had been uncovered, but the story it told was far from over. The detective's eyes narrowed. The game was afoot, and Paris held its breath. The damp chill of early morning clung stubbornly to the cobblestones of Rue Saint-Lazare as Detective Lucien Moreau stepped out from the shadowed doorway of Lise Dumas' photography studio. The city was beginning to stir. Distant whistles from the train station punctuated the murmur of awakening Paris. His polished shoes clicked softly against the worn pavement as he made his way toward the corner cafe, a place Henry Lefebvre had long owned, and where whispers of the neighborhood's secrets gathered like smoke. The cafe's wooden sign creaked faintly in the breeze as Lucien pushed open the door, greeted by the comforting scent of roasted coffee beans and freshly baked bread. Inside, the warm glow of gas lamps spilled across the worn parquet floor. Henry stood behind the counter, polishing a glass with a threadbare cloth, his round face breaking into a genuine smile upon seeing the detective. "Ah, Monsieur Moreau," Henry said, voice low but welcoming. "Come to hear the latest gossip, have you?" He chuckled softly, though his eyes betrayed a seriousness that matched the unease gripping the district. Lucien took a seat at the corner table, nodding. "The photographs have stirred more than curiosity, Henry. People are frightened. Strange things whispered from doorways, shadows cast by secrets. I need to understand what's stirring beneath the surface." Henry leaned in, lowering his voice. "It's the talk of Rue Saint-Lazare. Strange figures seen in the streets at odd hours, people vanishing without a trace, and photographs. Those damned photographs. Some say they're recursed, others that they show things that shouldn't be there." The detective's gaze sharpened. "Have you noticed anything suspicious? Anyone acting out of place?" Henry rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "There's a man, tall and gaunt, who's been lurking near the studio. Quiet, keeps to himself. Folks say he's a shadow, a ghost from the past. But no one knows much." Lucien's mind raced. Shadows, ghosts, words heavy with metaphor, but perhaps grounded in truth. He made a mental note to investigate this figure further. Leaving the cafe, Lucien walked the rain-slicked streets, their surfaces reflecting the flickering gas lamps like shards of broken glass. The clatter of a passing tram and the distant whistle of a departing train filled the air, underscoring the restless heartbeat of the city. He paused beneath a flickering street lamp, watching as shadows danced across the stone facades. The interplay of light and darkness was a constant reminder of the case's complexities, how appearances could deceive and truth could hide behind reflections. Returning to the studio, Lucien found Lise arranging prints on a cluttered workbench. The soft afternoon light filtered through dusty panes, casting a muted glow that softened the edges of the room. She looked up as he entered, her dark eyes meeting his with a cautious openness. "You asked about my family," she began quietly, gesturing toward a faded photograph pinned to the wall. My brother died years ago, under circumstances no one talks about. It changed everything. Lucien nodded, sensing the weight behind her words. Do you believe there's a connection between his death and these photographs? Lise hesitated, then spoke with a fragile resolve. I don't know yet, but I see echoes of that night in these images, ghosts trapped not just on film, but in time. The detective studied her face, noting the flicker of pain and determination. He understood that beneath her guarded exterior lay a well of grief and secrets, perhaps key to unraveling the mystery. Later, alone on a park bench beneath a canopy of autumn leaves, Lucien allowed himself a moment of reflection. The rustle of dry foliage mingled with the distant hum of the city, a little in the day's chaos. The stories he'd heard, the fears, the rumors, the glimpses into Lise's past, all tangled in his mind. Memory and perception, truth and deception, intertwined like the shadows that lengthened with the setting sun. He lit a cigarette, the flame briefly illuminating his sharp features before he exhaled a plume of smoke into the cool air. The case was far from simple. The photographs were more than images, they were puzzles crafted from light and shadow, reflections of pain and loss. As dusk deepened around him, Lucien felt the weight of the unseen forces at play and the urgency to pierce through the veils of illusion. The shadows on Rue Saint-Lazare were growing longer, and with them, the mystery deepened. Somewhere in the fractured reflections lay the truth, waiting to be uncovered. The air inside Lise Dumas' photography studio was thick with the scent of developing chemicals and the faint, lingering trace of cigarette smoke. Outside, the muted bustle of Rue Saint-Lazare's afternoon traffic ebbed and flowed like a distant tide, but inside, time seemed suspended in a dim pool of focused silence. Lucien Moreau stood over the large oak table littered with glossy photographs, each one a frozen moment that whispered secrets through the subtle interplay of light and shadow. He held a cigarette loosely between his fingers, lighting it with a practiced flick of his lighter, the small flame illuminating his sharp features just before it was swallowed by the curling smoke. His grey eyes, usually so steady and calculating, now flickered with a mix of curiosity and unease as he adjusted a small desk lamp, angling its glow to fall obliquely across one of the photographs pinned to a makeshift board. "Look here," Lucien murmured, pointing to a faint but unmistakable anomaly, a distortion along the edge of a figure's coat. A ripple in the light that shouldn't have been there. The reflection in the window doesn't match the angle of the light source. Something's off. Lise stood nearby, her dark hair pinned back tightly, a habit that framed her sharp, angular face with an austere elegance. Her eyes were fixed on the photograph, lips pressed into a thin line as she reached for a small magnifying glass. She moved with the meticulous precision of an artist, her fingers steady despite the tension that hung palpably in the room. "It's as if the image was altered," she said softly, "but not just in the dark room. There's something more, an intentional manipulation of light itself." Lucien nodded, exhaling a thin plume of smoke. "The killer isn't just taking photographs. They're playing with perception, with reality. Using light and shadow as weapons to deceive." He leaned closer, his fingers tracing the pattern of light reflected in the photograph. "These aren't accidental anomalies. They'd be deliberate distortions." Lise reached for a delicate lens filter, attaching it carefully to the edge of a small flashlight. She swept the beam across the photograph, watching as the image shifted, subtly hidden details emerging then fading with the changing angle. "See here," she whispered, pointing to a barely visible outline beneath the surface, a ghostly silhouette that seemed to flicker in and out of existence. "It's not just a double exposure, it's a layered illusion. Someone engineered this to confuse, to hide something in plain sight." Lucien's mind raced. The implications were chilling. If the killer could manipulate photographs with such skill, then every image might be a trap, every clue a carefully constructed lie. The investigation was not just a hunt for a murderer, but a battle against a master of deception. "We need to understand their technique," Lucien said, flicking ash into a small brass tray. If we can recreate these effects, maybe we can uncover what's been hidden. Liz nodded, her usual reserve softening as she met his gaze. I'll help you. But this means exposing more than just the killer. We will be peeling back layers of truth and memory, and some of those layers are dangerous. For a long moment, they stood together in the half-light, the weight of unspoken fears pressing down on them. Outside, the murmur of the city carried on, indifferent to the dark puzzle unfolding within the studio's walls. Lucien took a final drag from his cigarette and stubbed it out, determination hardening in his eyes. Then let's begin. They spent hours experimenting, shifting lamps, adjusting angles, moving lenses, and studying the photographs under every conceivable light. With each revelation, the room seemed to grow colder, the shadows deeper, as if the very air conspired to cloak the truth. Liz's hands moved with grace and precision, revealing the hidden patterns etched into the image's patterns that spoke of a mind obsessed with control and concealment. Lucien's analytical mind pieced together the fragments, building a picture of a killer who was both artist and deceiver. Amid their work, the boundary between ally and suspect blurred. Liz's guarded demeanor hinted at secrets she was reluctant to share. Lucien's own doubts gnawed at him. Was the photographer merely a witness caught in the shadows, or something more? As twilight deepened into night, the studio transformed into a theater of light and darkness, each photograph a stage for the deadly game unfolding. The detective's cigarette smoke mingled with the fading daylight, a silent testament to the fragile line between illumination and obscurity. In that moment, Lucien understood that the truth was not a fixed point, but a shifting landscape sculpted by light, reflection, and deception. And to catch the killer, he would have to navigate that landscape with equal skill and courage. The rain had begun to fall softly over Paris by the time Lucien Moreau arrived back at the studio near Rue Saint-Lazare. The cobbled streets glistened under the dim street lamps, each drop casting reflections that shimmered like fragile specters in the night. Inside the modest studio, the air was thick with the scent of developing chemicals and old paper, a faint hum of the city beyond the curtained windows. Lucien's eyes immediately sought the new photograph Liz had laid out on the worn wooden table. The image was unsettling. At first glance, it appeared to be a typical portrait, a man seated in a chair, his gaze direct, yet distant. But the deeper Lucien stared, the more he noticed the subtle anomalies, the faint outline of a shadow behind the man, a glimmer in the glass that seemed to betray another figure lurking just beyond the frame. It was the second victim. Yet, like the first, this man had never posed for the photograph. The discovery sent a shiver down Lucien's spine, the motif of light and reflection twisting once more into something sinister. Liz stood nearby, her usually steady hands now faltering as she adjusted the angle of a lamp to better illuminate the photograph. It's impossible, she whispered, voice barely audible. How could this be? Lucien turned to her, noting the tension in her jaw, the tightness around her eyes. Have you ever seen anything like this before? She hesitated, the silence stretching between them like a fragile thread. No. But sometimes I feel as though the past haunts these images, like they carry more than just a moment frozen in time. The detective's mind raced. The photographs were more than evidence. They were messages, distorted reflections of reality designed to deceive. And Liz's involvement was deeper than he had first suspected. The following day, Lucien made his way to a modest apartment a few blocks from the station. The door opened to reveal Madeleine Rousseau, her face pale and lined with exhaustion. She ushered him inside without ceremony, the air heavy with the scent of stale tobacco and wilted flowers. Seated across from her in a cramped sitting room, Lucien listened as Madeleine recounted the last days of her relative, the second victim. Her voice quivered with a cocktail of grief and disbelief. He was cautious, always looking over his shoulder, she said. But I never imagined this, that his image would be captured like a ghost. Lucien nodded gently, careful not to disturb the fragile balance of her emotions. Did he mention anyone threatening him? Madeline shook her head. No one, at least not to me. But there were shadows he never spoke of, secrets that seemed to weigh on him heavily. The conversation was interrupted only by the distant rumble of a passing train, a reminder of the world moving relentlessly forward, while they remained trapped in the past's grip. Back at the studio, Lays sat alone, the twilight filtering through the window, casting long shadows across her face. Her hands trembled slightly as she leafed through a small, worn notebook filled with sketches and notes, fragments of memories intertwined with technical observations. It was here, in this quiet moment, that her carefully constructed walls began to crumble. "I lost my brother," she confessed quietly when Lucien joined her. "He disappeared years ago, under circumstances no one ever understood." Lucien's eyes softened. "Do you think his fate is connected to these photographs?" She nodded slowly, a mixture of fear and relief in her gaze. "I want to believe the truth can be found, but I don't know if I'm ready to face it." Their shared vulnerabilities forged a new alliance, a partnership grounded in trust amid the shadows of deception. Together, they stood before the expansive wall of photographs adorning the studio's far side. The images, each a frozen fragment of a life, seemed to pulse with a hidden energy when touched by the shifting light. The interplay of illumination and shadow cast eerie patterns that seemed almost alive, as if the photographs themselves whispered secrets waiting to be uncovered. Lucien exhaled slowly, lighting a cigarette, the smoke curling upward in lazy spirals. "The killer is playing with us," he murmured, using light and reflection to blur the lines between truth and illusion. "But every shadow casts a shape, lies. We just have to find it." As they pored over the images, the studio felt less like a place of creation and more like a stage set for a sinister game. The danger was closing in, yet neither could turn away. With every new revelation, the ghosts in the frame grew more real, their silent pleas urging Lucien and lies deeper into the heart of the mystery. Outside, the rain intensified, drumming a relentless rhythm against the windows. Inside, the fragile boundary between memory and deception trembled, threatening to shatter with the next flash of light. And in that trembling stillness, the hunt for truth continued.